little bit of Ashikai. A little bit of Ashikai. There's more than one Loom of Fate. I don't know about that. I think Lumine might be the Loom of Fate. I'm interested to see where she goes with this. And I assume it's just spoilers for the latest dating quest. Let's have a look.
Look, I know there's a lot of stuff to talk about and many lore revelations to be had from all this stuff in the bedtime story arc on Quest.
Yes.
But there's something I'm a little fixated on. Something that's so incredibly obvious to me in hindsight that I feel a little bit silly for not realizing it until this quest. You see, Kari Bear doesn't have the only Loom of Fate. In fact, by my count, we've already seen at least 7 additional Looms of Fate. And there are probably...
Hold on. What?
Still more to come. Hoyoverse has literally been yeeting the same idea at us over and over.
What the fuck is the Loom of Fate? So basically, the Loom of Fate is an ideology so far that we know, where basically you could, it's like as threads that you could weave, and not everybody can reweave, but we could reweave, and also people die. It's like inheritance. Let's keep watching.
Over and over again, and it's only now that it's all coming together. So, in today's video, we're going to dive into what makes a Loom of Fate tick, why I think there are a bunch of them, and maybe, just maybe, we'll have a revelation or two along the way. You know, as a treat.
Nice choice
As
of words.
always, timestamps, spoiler warnings, citations, attributions, and links for further content will be in the description box, while post-video notes and corrections can always be found in the pinned comment.
Thank you very much, Ashikai.
Now then, let's start things off by establishing what a Loom of Fate is.
Yeah, so see, I just didn't want to spoil the video for those asking what it is, so yeah, we'll let Ashikai do that.
Actually, we need to learn about the ley lines first, because as Kari Bear tells us, the true purpose of the Loom of Fate is to weave new ley lines.
Told you.
And we can't exactly talk about how to weave something.
Because ley lines kind of our memories.
Without knowing what we're weaving now, can we?
Exactly.
To put it simply, ley lines are like the blood vessels of the planet that circulate elemental energy and memories in the same way the heart pumps blood throughout the body.
Yep.
This planetary vascular system is incredibly important because the elemental energy it carries literally makes up the physical world. Now, the game hints at this a lot, but rather than point you to a dozen or more examples, just take note of how this loading screen about the elements calls them the building blocks of the world. So considering that the elements are the building blocks of the physical world, I bet you can easily see how tampering with the ley lines that carry them around can cause all kinds of abnormalities.
Of course,
these
and
are
we've seen
called
the abnormalities.
ley line disorders, and you're probably...
We've seen them multiple times. Ley line disorders happen literally all the time, and also, I mean, they've been present since the beginning of the game, but there's also different types of ley line disorders, right?
Probably very familiar with them because they're inside of...
Including the red ley lines, which are kind of crazy. We've only ever seen that once, I think? Question mark?
Every combat domain. But in Teyvat proper, the best example of a large-scale ley line disorder is Dragon Spine. This icy mountain was originally a lush green paradise, but a celestial nail disrupted the flow of the local ley lines, which froze the entire mountain. But the...
Which is this is a very good point. It's like, bro, Dragon Spine was one of the biggest ley line disorders, and it was a lot to do with, like, Durian? No, Durian's fucking fruit. Durin. When are we gonna get more of that? Because his heart's still fucking pumping away under there, just chilling. Literally.
The effects brought about by the ley line disorders aren't something that are unique to just the ley lines.
True.
Technically speaking, any kind of massive release of elemental energy into an area can create big problems in the physical realm. Dragons, for example, are elemental beings of incredible purity, so their deaths can be likened to large-scale ley line disorders. That's why, in Nahida's second story quest, Nahida warns that if Apep dies and all her elemental energy is released, the forest will grow exponentially due to the sudden influx of dendro energy.
Apep dying would be a nuke.
For this reason alone, we can connect elemental beings like the dragons to the ley lines as far as their impact or power over the physical world goes.
Indeed.
And the game also wants us to link them together. See, ley lines are based on the Chinese concept of Dimai, or earth veins, which carry chi or vital energy throughout the planet. But Dimai is also connected to the concept of Longmai, or dragon veins. Fitting for the whole Dragon King thing, isn't it? But here's the thing. Elemental energy and memories are actually interchangeable. You can think of it like water and ice. They're the same molecule, but in two different states. So when stuff like the parametric transformer says elemental energy and memories flow within the ley lines, it's just talking about the same thing in two different variations. This is why Apep was able to reabsorb her elemental fragments during Nahida's second story quest and obtain all of her memories in the process.
Okay,
What, is that not convincing enough for you?
No, that is.
Well then, take a look at the game's stamina system, Resin. It's canonically condensed elemental energy, and we use it to cleanse blockages in the ley lines or to revitalize petrified trees. In return, the ley line blossoms and trees give us crystallized memories memories in the form of artifacts and ascension materials. So
Yeah.
basically, these plants are transmuting elemental energy from one form to another. And if
Console Genshin looks so weird to me.
transmutation makes you think of alchemy, then congratulations, because you're onto something. The Dust of Azoth tells us that alchemy is actually the, quote, study of the nature of matter and the rules that underpin its transformations, and ultimately it seeks to comprehend the working principles of the world and the flow of the ley lines. And the
Jesus.
description for the crafting bench tells us that the elements can be used to weave our journey, which is an interesting choice of words
It is talking about weaving, but also Azoth. I feel like we haven't got like any lore about Azoth other than the Dust of Azoth, obviously. That's pretty
to
interesting.
use in the context of weaving new ley lines with the Loom of Fate, don't you think? Now, you might be wondering why all this matters. After all, we're mostly just learning about the ley lines in order to understand how the Loom of Fate works,
True.
right? Well, yeah, that's exactly the point.
Yes.
See, while a completed Loom of Fate weaves new ley lines that carry elemental energy and memories around, an incomplete Loom of Fate can only be used to create and implant memories. A completed Loom loses this ability in favor of being able to change the world. But if you stop and think about it for a minute, it's not exactly that the Loom loses an ability when it reaches completion. It's that it starts altering things on a different scale, a larger scale. An incomplete Loom can alter the memory of a few
True.
people at a time, but a complete Loom can manipulate the memory of the whole world. And you know what holds the memory of the physical world in Teyvat? Irminsul,
The big
world
tree.
And it just so happens that Irminsul's roots are the ley
lines.
lines.
Yep.
Irminsul weaves ley lines just by putting out its own roots. It's just doing what a
Oh my god. Wait a fucking minute. Oh, Ashikai said we've already seen like 7 Looms of Fate. Is she going to be talking about the big ley line trees maybe like Irminsul?
tree normally does. And this ability alone is also enough to qualify it, in my eyes at
Looms
least,
of Fate?
as a Loom
Yeah.
of Fate.
Okay.
And actually, just by
Honestly, yes, or at least the threads. Maybe not an actual Loom of Fate. I still think there probably is only one Loom of Fate. But I do think the Irminsul and other respective things could be classified as the threads. Like the threads of fate are the travelers to reweave.
By being a tree, Irminsul perfectly illustrates why a Loom of Fate can only weave new ley lines and not alter existing ones in any way. See, if ley lines are the roots of a tree and the Loom of Fate is a tree, then it would make sense that a tree can only really grow its own roots and not extend or modify the roots of other trees.
True, that does make sense. I also still believe vehemently, and listen, y'all can fucking call me crazy as shit for this, dude. Y'all can call me crazy all you want. I don't care at this point. I genuinely still believe that the Torre burning the big fucking tree is still gonna happen. And I know a lot of people are like, there's no way. It was like a year ago. It was before Sumeru. It was almost 2 years ago, whatever. Dude, I still think it's going to happen. A lot of people say copium. I think if we try to reweave the threads of fate by using the different trees and stuff, the Torre's best plan, or like the Fatui's best plan to stop us from doing that is by burning them, right? I think it is going to happen. I also find it crazy how so many people are agreeing now, even though back when I said it originally, so many people were so dead set against it, dude. Bro, I said this shit like a year ago, and people were like, yeah, you're high. They treat it as much copium as Senora reviving, dude. It's kind of insane.
Right? And
It's
by
nuts.
that logic, the goal of any Loom of Fate operation is to create
We've just grown since then.
a brand new Irminsul to plant a new world tree.
Yes.
But with a name like Loom of Fate, we have to assume its job is to alter fate somehow, right? Well, if a complete Loom of Fate can only weave ley lines, then ley lines must be part of the system of fate. Now, I realize that last part might have been a bit obvious, and I didn't really need to say it, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page, because if
It's better to over-explain than it is to under-explain.
the ley lines are the roots of Irminsul and weaving ley lines is what a Loom of Fate does, then not only is Irminsul a Loom of Fate, but it's also fate itself. The reason I'm so hung up on this idea is that up to this point, the game has been telling us over and over and over again that it's the stars that dictate our fate. Constellations display your destiny. Everything is written in the stars, dictated by heaven. We can confirm this too thanks to Nouvelette's character stories, where he says that fate is the system by which Celestia controls the mortal world, and this system is related to constellations, which is made up of stars. This is a concept you can learn way more about in this video I made about how Celestia stole Teyvat with its fate system. It might be a little bit
Okay.
outdated now, but it's aged very, very well in light of Bedtime Story. But until
As do most.
you watch it, because you will watch it, the power of theories compels you, the biggest takeaway is that heaven and earth are reflections of each other. The
Yes.
heavens move in the form of the stars, and the ley lines of the earth adjust themselves to match. To quote Zhongli's Chinese burst line, the heavens move and everything else follows.
That's a
Layla,
cool-ass
an
burst line.
astrologer, even suggests this to us during the Parade of Providence event when she talks about how the stars appear to be reflections of the ley lines.
And then goes to
And
bed.
here's where things get interesting and a little bit tinfoil hat-ish.
Oh god,
About
here we go.
3 years ago, Reddit user Objective Emotional decided to try overlaying every Liyue character's constellation on top of
Yeah, dude, this is sick. So many people say this is copium too. I have a YouTube short going over this as well, and in those comments, people are saying it's literally just coincidence. And it's almost as if they didn't hear the literal line in the game that is like, there are no coincidences in Tibet. I don't think it's a fucking coincidence, dude. People are like, yeah, but if you put enough dots on an area, like, it's gonna make a shape eventually. Bro, there's not that many. It's not like there's 1,000 fucking dots that people are attaching together. There's only a few.
the map of Liyue using teleport waypoints as stars.
Yep.
And it worked. And the
Yep.
best part is that a lot of the constellations overlapped on top of areas that had particular meaning to the character in question.
Exactly. The Wangshu Inn for Zhao is like one of the biggest ones, dude. I hope she goes over that, but it's very fucking cool.
Like how Xiao's constellation
Okay.
overlapped with Wangshu Inn.
Yes.
Sure, there were a couple that were a bit off, like Chi-Chi's, but I bet that wouldn't be the case now that we have Chenyu Vale.
True.
This could be a complete coincidence, or another example of Hoyoverse's ridiculous attention to detail.
Yes.
I have no idea which it is, but
I think it's the
if
second.
it is intentional, then it might blow my mind. Because there's some stuff in the game that suggests this could actually be the case.
I think
See,
so.
the teleport waypoints and the statues of seven are all plugged directly into the ley lines. It's
Yep.
how they teleport us around the map. And their description says that they are seemingly forming a certain order.
Exactly.
Like, I don't know, maybe the order of the stars? And this is made even more mind-boggling because the teleport waypoints are constructed in such a way as to match the little memory nodes inside of Irminsul. They're
Which also have stars in them.
are the little nodes meant to create points of connection between the ley lines and the stars, anchor points for Irminsul in the physical realm.
Yep.
So what about the statues of seven? Yeah, what about those statues of seven?
I've never heard anything about the statues of seven, actually. This is going to be interesting.
So you guys might not know this, but all of my friends are much smarter than me. And one of my friends, Saber, made this thing a couple of years back because she thought it was super weird that the statues of seven looked like real-world ermine columns. The thing about
How in the ever-loving fuck are we only just bringing this up? What? Out of all of the things that have been researched about this game, how is this only coming out now? You didn't know? Fuck no, I didn't know. I didn't even know what a fucking ermine column was. Oh my god. That's incredible.
ermine columns is that they were frequently topped with the figure of a deity. Real-world reasoning aside, I think these statues of seven differ from the teleport waypoints in that they represent an Archon's role in controlling or regulating Irminsul. It's almost like
Agreed.
they're operating on a higher level of authority, which might be why unlocking a statue of seven reveals portions of the map, the physical world, while unlocking teleport waypoints doesn't. I could go.
Could that have anything to do with Celestia? If it reflects the stars, if like the heaven and earth is a reflection of each other, that would mean like Celestia and Tevat are reflections of each other. So maybe when we're unlocking parts... Wait, what if we're waking Celestia up by unlocking the statues of the seven? You know, like Celestia is still asleep, but we're waking up the mat for Tevat. What if, because they're a reflection of each other, we're the ones that are waking up Celestia? That's why they're still dormant, because we haven't unlocked all the regions yet.
Go on and on and on, but what it all
Interesting.
boils down to is that Celestia is basically
Let
in
me cook.
control of the mega loom of fate that is Irminsul. And if anyone wants to buck the system and change their fate, they're gonna have to make a loom that can rival Irminsul.
Yes.
And that's a really tall order. Not that it's stopped people from trying. Just to recap, an incomplete Loom of Fate is capable of creating and implanting memories at first, and those abilities get stronger over time. If I had to guess what that looked like, I'd say that the memory creation is the first ability it gets,
Yes.
then memory alteration, then memory deletion before finally combining
Memory
the three into
implanting.
the ability to weave the ley lines themselves. And I think
guess that'd be
this
creation.
because Nahida exists. Nahida is the avatar
Oh.
of Irminsul, a completed Loom of Fate, and as its avatar, she possesses the ability to read minds, travel through the ley lines, and enter and manipulate people's dreams.
Yeah,
Her
true.
predecessor also created the Akasha system, which linked the minds of the people of Sumeru together to form one collective consciousness that she used to overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. Which, frankly, sounds a bit like challenging fate.
True, she's also the character with the most voice lines in the game, which means she's a certified fucking yapper, which is completely irrelevant, but a pretty interesting interesting fact.
Especially since one of its functions is predicting the future based on previously collected data. It's predicting fate and trying to find alternate outcomes at the same time. We learned about this feature in the Chapter 3 Archon quest when the Academia used it to track Cyno's movements. But the Academia also used it in another, more suspicious way.
Okay.
They picked a person, in this case, Nilou, who became
Not more than Paimon. I think she actually does have more voice lines than Paimon in the game, right? I think it was confirmed. I could be wrong.
the host of a collective dream. The dream repeated itself over and over and over again, and every cycle, everyone in the dream forgot what happened in the previous cycle, so it was like it never happened. And this included the traveler, who would have been subject to the same issue had Nahida not been restoring their memories every single loop. Now, if you really think about it, this is just an example of an incomplete loom of fate. Just like Caribert, Nilou was the host, or the tether that the loom was built around, and all the people within the dream are providing the jnana, or dream energy used to power it.
Wait, she's fucking cooking with this theory.
Since dreams are likened to memories, and memories can be converted into elemental energy, we can think of this as memories powering the dream. It's not exactly clear to us that Caribert's loom worked exactly the same way, with memories powering the whole loom of fate, but set your skepticism aside for a few minutes, because this is only the first of 5 incomplete looms that we're going to talk about.
Okay.
If you unlocked Remuria, you're probably going to remember Phobos. The story goes that the god king Remus tried to find a way to defy Fontaine's fate of melting back into the primordial sea. This is the same prophecy that we had to deal with in the Chapter 4 Archon quest. But Remus wasn't able to actually do this.
Yes.
Fate couldn't be broken. So he figured that if he couldn't change fate, he could just make a new fate. If he put all of his people into this new fate machine, then they'd
Bro said we have fate at home.
be subject to the new fate and not the old fate that was carved into Irminsul. That's what Phobos was supposed to do. Using an eroded Seelie named Sibylla as the tether, like Caribert or Nilou, he separated the minds and bodies of his people and placed them into Phobos. And in its incomplete form, Phobos was able to manipulate the minds of others and alter memories. The same thing happens thousands of years later with René de Petrichor. He also wanted to avoid the same fate that Remus tried to change by using himself as the tether to create a collective consciousness of everyone in Fontaine, thus binding them to a completely different fate. Although the memory manipulation stuff was mostly limited to Nartzenkreuz being able to absorb people and obtain their special skills and abilities and knowledge,
Well, that was
what's actually
the surface
interesting
level.
about this loom in particular is that the Nartzenkreuz questline is full of mentions of golden butterflies, and we follow a trail of golden butterflies throughout the bedtime story quest to find Caribert. These golden butterflies are also all over the place inside of Caribert's realm of consciousness.
True.
I talk more about butterflies and their significance in this video on Istra, but I think the direct parallel is interesting enough to merit a mention, because that's a very specific use of symbolism. And that brings us to the desert and Deshret's golden slumber. In that case, a million minds merged into one, and he separated mind from body, presumably.
Bro, I unironically think, and I think a lot of people will agree with this, but, dude, I'm going to be totally honest. I think of all of the characters that we've heard about in the lore so far, in the game itself, like in dialogue and quests, I think Deshret is not only one of the coolest fucking characters in the entire game, I think he's the most lore-relevant person in the entire game. We just don't know enough yet. I genuinely think he is going to be what changes the course of everything we know so far. I really, really do.
Presumably using himself as a tether as well. There's no known memory manipulation here, but that's probably because everyone was distracted by all of the forbidden knowledge shenanigans. Although it's equally possible that the goddess of flowers actually became the tether. Honestly, that would make a bit more sense. But that's beside the point. You might have noticed, though, that I shifted a bit from talking about memory manipulation to hive minds or collective consciousnesses.
I'll hide them.
And that's partly because it's very Jungian, and Hoyo loves Jungian psychology, especially in Genshin, and partly because of the Valerian Mirage. The Valerian Mirage was the 3.8 limited event foreshadowing the events of Chapter 4, as all pre-region patch events do. It took place in a
Yeah, can we talk about that for a second? Bro, the 3.8 summer event literally foreshadowed the entirety of the Fontaine Archon quest. Quite literally, almost the entirety. That's some crazy shit. Because we spoke about that at the point of the 3.8 event, and going into 4.1 or 2, we kept referring back to the 3.8 event to try and come up with theories, and they were accurate. They worked. So I'm very curious what the next Genshin patch is going to be, because I'm pretty sure the next one is 4.8, right? We should get the summer event.
contained bottle world with an oceanid controlling the entire thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what is an oceanid but a collective consciousness?
True.
In fact, Adia's whole thing was about creating clones of the people who visited her and giving those clones a chance to live out their dreams inside the bottle. If
Yes.
they weren't fated to achieve their dreams in the real world, then they would be fated to achieve them in the bottle. At the
True.
heart of this bottled world was a giant tree, very Irminsul-like, and that permeates the entire landscape, and it's topped with a large wheel with a core in the middle.
I'll be honest, I didn't really get Irminsul-like from the tree, but I can see it now. I guess the reason I didn't get... No, we did have Volosum. Yeah, I never really thought it was very Irminsul-esque, but looking at it now, it kind of does.
That permeates the entire landscape, and it's topped with a
Kinda
large
does.
wheel with a core in the middle. The wheel isn't spinning when we first arrive, and most of the bottle's functions are broken because of it. So to fix
Interesting.
it, we have to collect several objects that represent the most important memories of the hydroclone people in the bottle. Then
like
those
the Loom,
components
huh?
are used to reconstruct the blueprint of the wheel, which physically fixes it. Then all we need is to activate the wheel with the Shinro casket, and the wheel begins to spin again, putting out threads of energy which fixes everything that had previously broken. And by the way, the wheel is a spinning wheel, like the
Yes,
one that
a
spins
loom.
threads that are woven on a loom. But even with the
Yes.
wheel fixed, it needed the Shinro casket in order to activate. And this is interesting because the Shinro casket was made from the remains of a dragon-type yokai that responds to people's wishes. I go into way more detail about it in this video, but did you also know that Archons get their power from their people's faith? Well, faith is kind of like wishes, if you think about it. So if you pray to a statue of 7, you are entrusting them with your wishes, meaning the little orbs that the statue are holding are a lot like the pearl of the Shinro casket, little power nodules for the ley lines. People offer their wishes and dreams up as faith to the statues of 7 who send that power to Celestia, and Celestia may or may not use it to control the entire world. Anyway, all of this is just to say that memories are what I think power the Loom of Fate, and I think the Central Hub's core wheel is there to illustrate all of the pieces needed to complete a loom. You will need a tether, in this case Kari Bear, a power source, memories, and a lot of them, and a core, which I think is what the Eye of the First Field Tiller is. It's the equivalent of the pearl that the statues of 7 hold, or the pearl of the Shinro casket.
That makes sense, actually.
Roosevelt
a
actually
lot of
reminded me of
sense.
this, but in one of the many Aranyaka quests, we meet a guy named Jazari who was studying Conrian technology, and he says that ruin machines possess a core that uses a dark power called an eye. Then if we go back to the We Will Be Reunited questline, Dainsliff said that the Abyss Order intends to build a mechanical god out of one of Venti's missing statues and the limbs of Osile. Then they're going to
Yes.
use the Eye of the First Field Tiller to replace the orb that Venti is holding. Do you remember how I called the orb a little power nodule? Yeah, well, think about what we collect for the statues of 7. They're oculi, also known as God's missing pupils in
Oh,
Chinese.
Jesus Christ.
And think about what visions actually are. They're external foci, fragments of an archon's mastery, also called eyes of God in Chinese.
Yes.
And illusions, also external magical foci, and also evil eyes. And according to Venti, visions are primitive versions of gnosis, and gnosis are the heart of God, but they're also the remains of the third descender, much like how the Shinro casket is made from the remains of a deceased dragon
Fuck, dude, she's cooking so hard.
yokai. Now take a look at
Hold
the
on, I'm gonna go back.
Gnosis
Dude, that's such a fucking, that's a 3-course meal.
guy, and also evil eyes. And according to Venti, visions are primitive versions of gnosis, and gnosis are the heart of God, but they're also the remains of the third descender, much like how the Shinro casket is made from the remains of a deceased dragon yokai. Now take a look at the first field tiller's eye. Notice how similar it is to the perpetual mechanical array's heart?
Yes.
To me, it feels a bit like the relationship between the vision eye and the gnosis heart. But
The
whether
more
it's the
primitive
Eye of the
version.
First Field Tiller, the Perpetual Heart, Visions, Delusions, Gnosis, they all function in similar ways and grant their hosts permission to wield power beyond the capabilities of a normal person or machine. This kind of makes them seem like symbols of authority, allowing some people or machines more control over the world than others. And if you think of them as symbols of authority,
Imagine the field hills are made from Deschrit's, but that wouldn't even make sense. I'm kidding.
then
I'm kidding.
as my buddy Crystal Marie put it, the Eye of the First Field Tiller might represent the authority of humankind. It's a synthetic eye, one with no ties to any god. It's the orb for Kari Bear's metaphorical statue of 7, or statue of 1, I guess, since he's
Yeah.
alone. They needed this eye in
Defiled
particular because,
statue,
as
maybe.
Dainsliff said, the first field tiller was a prototype, and therefore its capabilities had no restrictions. In other
Could it be the defiled statue if it was a statue of 1? I think it could be.
The first field tiller was a prototype, and therefore its capabilities had no restrictions. In other words, it has more authority than any other field tiller. And this has to be tied to memory somehow, because if this eye is like the other eyes, well, that's just a shared trait of them all. Like, using a delusion erodes the user's memories, and forcibly taking away a vision from its owner also alters memories.
Yeah, it does.
So it stands to reason that there is some level of memories being stored inside of these little devices. But okay, sure, this is all great information and all that, but what does it mean? What is Caribear's Loom of Fate even supposed to do? Well, I think it's going to be used to revive the homeland. In other words, Conria. The Abyss Twin is already...
Holy fuck. Wait, it makes sense. Oh, fuck. Wait, it makes so much sense. Before we get any further into it, hold on. Back in the Teyvat chapter interlude trailer, Conria is, like, blotted out in the text as if the memories of it aren't quite there. So the Loom of Fate bringing all those memories back could be it, especially because it should be after Natlan, which is the final region, after all the ley lines have been connected. And then that should awaken the heavenly principles if it's a reflection of Celestia, because then all of the statues of the Sevens have also been activated. Oh yeah, after Snezhnaya. That actually does make a shit ton of sense.
Used to revive the homeland.
That makes a lot of sense.
Conria. The Abyss Twin has already claimed that this is one of the goals of the Abyss Order, and I think this could be why the Abyss Twin and Dainsleif had a falling out in the first place. Dainsleif knows, or at least believes, that this idea of reviving the homeland by creating a new world tree just for Conria is either too dangerous, too costly, or just outright doomed to fail.
Yeah.
And that's why he tells Halfdan that there's no need to revive the homeland. But what Dainsleif doesn't know is that this has been done before. We've actually seen a completed Loom of Fate come into being on screen, and it revitalized an entire nation and freed it from the heavenly principles. And I'm talking about the sacred Sakura. Think about it. A experienced a weird gap or alteration in her memory after Makoto died, or perhaps she was the one unaltered while the entirety of Inazuma was altered. However you slice it, there were memory shenanigans early on, just as would be the case.
This is a weird topic, though, because this was still very confusing to me, at least, on what exactly it did and if the tree was existing before, because it didn't alter our memories and stuff, and
With an incomplete.
It was kind of a weird one.
However you slice it, there were memory shenanigans early on, just as would be the case with an incomplete Loom of Fate. Then later in her realm of consciousness, Makoto turned into a seed. And if a completed Loom of Fate becomes a tree, then an incomplete loom is basically just a seed, right? So Makoto, a god, someone capable of changing the world according to Nicole, became the scaffolding or the tether for a loom. And A granted it life, probably by feeding it her own hopes and wishes, which is just like what happens with the Shinro casket. And that should have allowed Makoto's memories to weave new ley lines that would be, and I quote,
so maybe all of the trees are looms, but it's just like a loom of a different cycle. Because we know that the entire world's going through like a samsara, right? There's been different cycles, like maybe 7 cycles for like the constellations and things like that. That's also just a theory, but it adds up.
Free of the heavenly principles. And why would the Sacred Sakura be free of the heavenly principles? Because the Sacred Sakura is a loom of fate separate from Irminsul, a complete loom. The stars in heaven can't influence it anymore because it's its own thing, a completely separate system. I'm also starting to suspect that Makoto needing to buy A time with the planting of the Sacred Sakura had nothing to do with A's grieving period, but instead is referring to an event that hasn't happened yet. Remember how we saw Dotori burning down Irminsul in Kale's dream? I'm not saying that's literally what's going to happen, but I think it hints at the goal, the destruction, or at least the ultimate overhaul of Irminsul, of fate itself. Like the end goal of the game, at least according to the Travail trailer, is to reweave the threads of fate. Yes. So perhaps Makoto is merely buying A enough time and freedom to be able to assist in making that process come to pass. Because it should be a good thing, seeing as it's the responsibility of our beloved Traveler. And speaking of which, a lot of people were really upset that the Traveler had their memory messed with, when the whole point of being a Descender is being immune to that kind of thing. But that's actually not true. Being a Descender only makes you immune to Irminsul's tampering. That doesn't mean they're immune to everything. I mean, even a simple device like the Akasha was capable of mind bending and dream warping the Traveler.
Sure.
But I do think it's curious that the Traveler is specifically resistant to Irminsul tampering. And I've been wondering if they're, like, integrated into the tree directly. Like, the Sustainer of Heavenly Principles restricted their powers, and it's only through touching statues of the Seven that the Traveler can regain them, and also to obtain their constellation at the very beginning of the game, because they didn't have one.
Actually, it's weirder than that. The constellation name is listed on their profile, but it's unavailable on the constellation screen, so they had a constellation, but were denied access to it. Make that of what you will. Make of that what you will. What if the other twin is just a memory that we can only see in dreams and shit? And no. There's so many things that this could be, but that's probably not it. I was thinking, what if, like, we're just a memory? Or, like, what if... I don't know. It's I'm cooking too much in my own head, and it doesn't make sense enough to explain. It's weird. I don't really get this.
They probably didn't have a fate.
They probably had a constellation, and then... I think it makes sense. I think we went up to Celestia to try stop them with Lumine, right? If we're talking Ether as the quote-unquote main MC. And then as we were banished back from Celestia, they blocked off the fucking constellation power or whatever, made us start from scratch. I think that makes sense. I also love how this Traveler is called Missing Number. That's fucking hilarious. Yeah, I think that does make sense. I need more time to cook it in my head, but I was saying, like, what if Lumine's the Loom of Fate, because we've only really seen her in Memories and Dreams, other than in We Will Be Reunited. But there's nothing really confirming that it's really her, but all things point to it actually being her, obviously. But some other weird shit can always come out and happen there. I don't think we actually got to touch, like, physically touch. Kind of like what happened in the latest quest where we went through each other, right? That's a theory that needs a lot more cooking, I think.
So it makes me wonder whether their powers are really sealed within them and they're just unlocking them by touching the Statues of Seven, or if they were stolen and then placed into the ley lines and we're only now retrieving them.
I think that's probably what it is.
If our powers are elemental and elemental energy can be memories, then maybe the Traveler's memories are already a part of the world. Maybe there's things they've already forgotten that they don't even realize they've forgotten. And if I may end this video with a good old-fashioned crack theory, I'm actually wondering if
what if Dane is a memory? He doesn't interact with anyone than the twins, Paimon and the Abyss Order. I think he spoke to a couple of NPCs. Also Kaya, right? I think. And also in the latest quest, didn't he speak... he spoke to the girl that we were with. I forgot her name already. Carabear's little fucking love fling, you know? And she just, like, nodded and walked away as well. It's a cool little theory, though.
Irminsul was planted by Conria through time shenanigans, much like how A planted Makoto 500 years in the past. I wondered then if Dane is somewhat aware of this phenomenon, you know, because he's called the Bough Keeper and all that, the keeper of branches, like Irminsul tree branches. Because, like, is it really a coincidence that A and Makoto are twins and one becomes their nation's Loom while the other lives on in mourning and makes terrible decisions? Because
which, if we go based off of the other interesting things that we know, you could kind of say the same about Nahida and Rukkhadevara, right? And then the twin theory keeps going, and then we are also twins. And I did say, what if Lumine or one of us is the Loom of Fate? One of us has to sacrifice to become the Loom, and the other way. It could happen. Like I say, the theory needs more cooking. For sure, but I do think that could definitely be a thing that's heavily foreshadowed.
Technically, the Abyss twin could be A in this scenario, and the Traveler could be Makoto, destined to become a seed that their twin plants thousands of years in the past in order to save the world in the future.
Exactly.
And that's why the Traveler is alone at the end of the Travail trailer when Dainsleif says, the threads of fate will be yours to reweave.
Exactly.
Because remember, a Loom of Fate can only weave its own ley line, so if
Loom-een.
we're re-weaving, then that implies we are changing the ley lines that are already there, which means we have to be manipulating Irminsul, and not a new Loom. Unless we are actually completely destroying Irminsul and then becoming our own brand new Loom, and then re-weaving Fate to replace the old Fate, and it's called reweaving because we're just, like, recreating the same system but better. But I don't know, I'm a little skeptical about that, because it's not like Irminsul itself can't be manipulated. True. After all, both Nahida and Wanderer managed to at least achieve minor alterations to it. So if you had a greater level of authority, one could potentially change the entire world, right? That should be the Traveler.
We say it should be the Traveler, but also who's collecting all the authorities at the minute?
In this case. Actually, now that I think about it, does Shoki no Kami count as a loom? It's got the Gnosis as the core, Wanderer as the tether, and 168 divine knowledge capsules full of memories. It does fit the criteria. Oh, also, if the Loom of Fate requires a core, then I wonder if Irminsul's core is actually the Genesis Pearl, because losing the Genesis Pearl would totally explain how Celestia's Fate machine lost its functions when Teyvat got invaded during the fall of the unified civilization. It's definitely not a new idea. I've certainly pitched it a few different ways, like I did in this video, which you should totally go watch right now because it's related, and I totally haven't mentioned it multiple times throughout this video already.
It's a great video. We've already seen it, but it is a fucking great video.
Thank you all so much for supporting the channel and watching my nonsense, and please take care of yourselves. See you next time.
Yeah, that shit's insane, dude. That was a great theory. I'll keep it a buck here, chat. I usually get quite lost with Ashikai theories, just because it is an insane amount of information that's a lot of the time really difficult to process. At least watching one time. I usually have to watch them twice, like once after stream to be able to process all the info. Bro, that was a perfect fucking video for me. I digested all that information so easily. That was great. I think that was fantastic.